Okay, so my talk tonight is about magic bullets. All right, and what magic bullets they're drugs that can be used to treat. They're different drugs which have these almost magical properties to be able to treat very horrible diseases for which if we didn't have a treatment would be, the only thing you could do really is pray for the person. And so, drugs that work against really horrible pathogens like syphilis and tuberculosis are considered what we consider magic bullets. And then drugs like morphine that can alleviate excruciating pain would be considered a magic bullet. So my talk tonight is about magic bullets, their origins, and what's happened in the last 100 years, some of my own research, and then what I think are some really exciting new results from other researchers. So we can skip back up to that. Okay, so salicylic acid. That's a willow tree there. And the bark of the willow tree has a compound called salicylin in it, which is a natural product again. And salicylin is converted when ingested into salicylic acid. And so the tree, the teas made from the bark of the willow tree have been known for thousands of years to be really useful against pain and against fevers as well, all right? And so it acts as an analgesic to relieve pain. It also acts as a fever reducer. And this is now much milder than morphine, but because it's not addictive and doesn't have the really profound pharmacological effects of morphine, for mild to moderate pain, this is like the perfect drug. And I'm sure we've all taken aspirin at some point in our lives, all right? And so salicylic acid is currently used for things like acne medicines, wart removers, and skin peels. And as a wart remover, if you buy a lot of these wart removers and you look at the label, all they are is salicylic acid dissolved in acetic acid. You spot it on the wart, the acetic acid evaporates away, leaving a white crust. That's the salicylic acid, okay? So the next slide. So this is salicylin here, all right? And what it is it's a glycoside of this dialcohol. And in the acidity of the stomach, then this is cleaved off to give you just the free dialcohol. And then this is really rapidly metabolized, or fairly rapidly metabolized. This alcohol is metabolized to the carboxylic acid, which is salicylic acid. And this has the biological effects. All right? And salicylic acid is really easy to manufacture on scale, so then the chemical synthesis came along and they make this in bulk. The thing is, it's really hard on the stomach. It's a better analgesic than salicylin is, because it's the actual active compound directly, but it's really hard on the stomach. And someone named Charles Friedrich Gerhardt acetylated it in 1953 just as a chemistry experiment, but didn't realize that he had actually made something really useful. Later on, the Bayer Drug Company, first they made phenacetin, which is still a commonly used analgesic, but then they figured out that the acetyl salicylic acid was this really wonderful analgesic. When you acetylated it, you ended up with a much mild. It didn't cause the gastric distress of just straight salicylic acid. So aspirin is still kind of hard on the stomach, so you find buffered versions of it and everything else. And so this was one of Bayer's first drug. It wasn't their very first drug. I talked to a few Bayer people, and they kind of straightened me out on that. If you go to Wikipedia, it says it's their first drug, but we have quite a few Bayer or former Bayer people here, actually. All right. So now a related compound that's kind of interesting is this compound. This is the methyl ester of salicylic acid, which we also know as wintergreen. So if you like wintergreen gum, then you're chewing methyl salicylate. But they don't put very much methyl salicylate in it. It's a very strong flavor component. But that's the methyl salicylate is also known as wintergreen. So next slide. All right. So now there's another compound that I really like to talk about, which is quinine. Because if you want to talk about a magic bullet that came from antiquity, this is it. This is the magic bullet that probably gave a lot of people their ideas about treating, that it might be possible to treat all these really horrible infectious diseases somehow. All right. So this is and I never knew how to pronounce this until I looked it up. This is the cinchona tree, and this is what it looks like here. And you can peel the bark off, and if you look at these sticks of bark, they look like the sticks of cinnamon. If you ever look at cinnamon, it comes in these little tubes. And the old pharmacy building that I worked in before we moved to the new building, we had in the basement some scary stuff down there, actually, not racks and torture machines, but we had like kilogram bottles of phenobarbital, and we had, and worse than that, we had big bottles of strychnine, another really bad toxin, and we had other stuff. But one of the things we had was big drums of cinchona bark. All right, and I should have grabbed some of that stuff and brought it with me because it was pretty interesting, actually. But anyhow, so the Quechua people of Peru were using the bark of this tree to treat fevers for a very long time. And the Spanish began starting to use it for fevers too. It took them a little while to get the idea, well, maybe this is useful. So took a little while. So they were using it for fevers, and malaria was endemic in many parts of Europe. And malaria is from Italian for mala area, meaning bad air. And Rome was in particular really seriously affected by malaria. And people have said, well, this was partially responsible for the fall of the Roman Empire, was the malaria. Malaria is a really bad disease. If you get sick with it, you're going to be really sick, all right? So it was found in Rome in 1631 that the cinchona bark extract seemed to work miracles against malaria. And to say it's a miracle means like the person would drink the quinine water and they would be better. And it was not just treating a fever, it's actually curative, all right? And that became the standard treatment for malaria until the 1940s. And quinine was isolated in pure form in 1817. And I don't know if I can get this to work or not. Let's see. Another property of quinine that was really important to the development of chemistry, and we probably won't be able to see this without turning off the lights. I don't know if you can see that. So if you see that, all right, the quinine's got the property of being fluorescent. All right, so if you turn off the lights, you'd be able to see this really well. And anyone who wants to come up and see this some more later, and there's no gin in this all right, but that leads me to so quinine was able to prevent or cure malaria. If you took quinine every day, it prevents you from getting malaria. If you're sick with malaria and you take quinine, it'll cure it. And so a lot of Africa, a lot of India, a lot of the warmer places of the world where there's lots of water have endemic malaria. And malaria can really wipe out an army. All the Europeans who wanted to go all over the world couldn't go there because they were so susceptible to malaria. And so the British, they started extracting quinine from the bark, and then the British went to India and made it a colony, but they had to take quinine every day, all right? And quinine is extremely bitter. I don't know if, quinine is really bitter. And if you take the powder, all right, and try and wash it down with water, it's insoluble in water, all right? And so what they wash it down with, do you think they would wash it down with? What would work for an organic compound as a solvent? Well, gasoline will work. Gasoline or kerosene would work. But they used gin. And they were and the English were drinking gin at the time. So they were washing it down with gin, and they found out, well, it's not so bad, And they went home, and I was like, geez, I really miss that taste. I miss that. So they put the quinine into the bottle of gin and tonic, about 80 milligrams, which means you got to drink about 8 or 9 of those to keep you from getting malaria every day. But that's where gin and tonics came from. So, all right. Anybody have any questions? Okay, good. There'll be an exam at the end of the. All right. So then Sobarson. So quinine was discovered. It's curative for malaria. It's really fantastic. And then Sobarson was developed through this synthetic medicinal chemistry effort by Paul Ehrlich, All right. And so that really spurred interest and research into finding drugs for this and that and everything else. All right. So this started that explosion of drug discovery that occurred in the early 1900s. And so a man named Gerhard Domagic, who was working for Bayer, by the way. Everybody who's famous came from Bayer, it seems like, you know. And he was screening for agents that will work against streptococcus, and which was really, if you get a strep throat, usually recover. Every once in a while, you get sick and die. All right, and so he was screening compounds for anti-streptococcal agents. And it was extremely fortunate because he was screening for activity in mice. He wasn't screening on petri dishes, he was screening in mice. And one of the compounds they tested was Prontosil, which is this thing here. And this looks vaguely like Solvarsen, if you think about it. And the reason is because a lot of these compounds were coming out of the German dye industry. The Germans were, textiles were big business back in those days, all right? They're still big business. Everyone's got to have clothes, right? All right. But anyhow, so dyes for textiles was big business. So they had all this chemistry for making these dyes. All these compounds just about are dye-related molecules. When you look at their structures and you think about their chemistry and their colors and everything. And he tested this compound called Prontosil. And it was active against the streptococci in mice. Woohoo! Big, it's really fantastic. And they tested it in petri dishes, and it's inactive. Oh well, okay, who cares about that, right? But as long as you administer the Prontosil to the person, it cures them. And it was the first life-saving drug for these severe streptococcal infections. And Domagic actually used this drug to save the life of his own daughter. And this drug also saved the life of a very young Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the son of the future president. And so this was like a really profound step now it worked for like certain of the gram-positive organisms and Streptococcus, but it wasn't a universally. But it's inactive in this form. It has to be metabolized in vivo. And so when it's metabolized, it's split apart to yield sulfanilamide. And this was the first of the sulfanilamide antibiotics. And then these were developed into a whole bunch of other derivatives that had better activities. So next slide.